Well, hey, everybody, Mike Schindler coming to you live from my home studio. Welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. I am, in fact, Mike Schindler, and this is the show where we interview some of America's most elite men and women who have served this country in hopes that you, our listener, get an aha moment that you can apply to your own life. Before we dive in with today's guest, I want to thank our sponsors, Bone Frog Cellars and Bone Frog Coffee, founded by my friend Tim Cruikshank and his business partner, David Johnston. A portion of the proceeds of this fine wine and coffee go to the Navy SEAL Foundation to support the families of our fallen SEALs. So thank you to those guys for sponsoring this show. And occasionally we interview individuals who have not served this country because the topic is so relevant. And that's who we have today, Christine Soule, of who I will introduce here in just a little bit. But I thought it would be really important for us to bring somebody on that has experience in navigating the difficulties that sometimes life throws at us. I think the struggle with identity, depression, purpose is very real for many people, especially coming out of this pandemic. This past year, I think people put their trust in routines and schedules, politicians, science, and a lot of that stuff didn't come through. It changed. And so we're going to discuss that today. So for many, who they are, why they're here, and what does it mean to be them is a pretty important topic. And to help us break down this topic is author of Broken to Beautiful, Christine Soule. Christine, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a total pleasure to have you. I'm glad you're on. This is such an important topic, especially now with everything that is going on. I want to really dive into your story because it's such an impactful story. People that when they go to Broken to Beautiful, when they start to read up about your experience, I think they'll be moved by your story. And that's why I said, boy, you'd be great to have on this show, because many of our veterans oftentimes struggle with identity. And a lot of it has to do with things they experienced in the past. Your story, dysfunctional background, I'm going to say that in the kindest of ways, troubled early adulthood. Share with our listeners kind of the circumstances surrounding your upbringing.
Yeah, so I had a very unique upbringing. I had a father who was married 7 times. My mom was married 4. At about the age of 5, they got a divorce, and he was the dad that kind of, I saw maybe 5 or 6 times after that. So I ended up living life very much as a latchkey kid. My mom had 3 jobs. She was my hero. But regardless, I ended up starting drugs at about the age of 10. At 17, I got pregnant with my first daughter. And less than 2 years later, I ended up having identical twin boys. I was a meth addict. I was abused. I was trafficked. I was living a gay lifestyle. I was filled with rage and unforgiveness. And at 21, I fell to my knees. I cried out to God. I said, if you are real, take my life. It's yours. And it was utter surrender. I couldn't do it on my own any longer. And, I so tangibly felt the power and presence of God. I went and I threw the drugs and alcohol away. And where I should have had a heart attack, I didn't even have a desire, temptation, or withdrawal. I was completely set free. And I know that that's not everyone's journey, but that was my journey. I was freed in that moment. And it set me on this road of trying to figure out who this Jesus guy is, as well as how am I going to survive now with 3 babies. And I ended up bouncing from couch to couch, house to house. And so that was really what so many would see as a very difficult season in my life, but it was the first time I really found freedom. And it was one of the most joyous times of my life. Even though I had uncertainty, I had complete and utter trust.
There's so many areas I can go to in this story. Those who serve in the military, oftentimes different upbringings, right? I mean, that's the beauty of the military. It can take anybody from many different backgrounds, shape them into who they need them to be to serve a greater mission. And we know that many people allow their circumstances to really define them. And here you shared your story of these circumstances that, many never break those chains, right? They get trapped by it. You had a catalyst moment, let's say, that prompted that, where you fell to your knees and said, "Boy, just take me." Was that out of desperation, Christine, or was that out of, listen, I just need to find a new path forward?
Yeah, that was total desperation. I had actually been pretty brutally raped just
Hmm.
prior to that. And it had gotten to such an extreme extent that I really had such rage and fear and pain that gripped me. And I was utterly desperate. If it weren't for my three babies, I don't know that I would be alive today. And I probably would have taken my life at that point because I didn't see a way out. And so it was through that desperation that I fell to my knees.
So how did you know? I mean, that had to be, how did you know to do that? Right. I mean, some people are like, God's abandoned me. And that's why I'm in the mess I'm in. Right. I mean, if God was so real, I wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. So how did you break that barrier and not blame God for your issues?
I did not grow up in a Christian home, but I always believed that there was God.
Hmm.
And in fact, I would sit in strip clubs telling people, you know what, you need Jesus. And so I don't know where that came from. I really don't. I feel that God had a plan and purpose for my life. I have always spoken very boldly about him because of such redemption that he had given to me, that I just want everyone in the world to see how good he is. So there was never he did this to me. I know that I made choices in my life that were not the best choices. And part of the whole title, Broken and Beautiful, is really around something called kintsugi art. Are you familiar with that?
Not familiar with that. No.
So kintsugi art is uh, it's a piece of artwork that has been broken. In fact, if you see right here,
Hmm.
I'm trying to point, I have some kintsugi art. It's art that's broken, and where it would really be deemed as trash and thrown away, but instead it's repaired with gold. And now that same piece of art has become unique and beautiful and even more valuable. And so I think you kind of touched on something. You said that a lot of the time our trauma and tragedies kind of define us. I almost don't want to say, that's not what defines us. I agree with that completely. But actually, let those broken areas be areas where you have so much radical freedom that you want to pour into other people's lives so that now they can be set free. There's
Hmm.
actually a scripture I love. It's Genesis 50:20. And it's, what the enemy does for evil, God will turn for good.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have said to me, well, God never turned it for good in my life. Well, keep reading. It says for the saving of many lives. So what are we doing through our tragedy to help save other people's lives? And,
Yeah.
and you know what? When you step out, and I know, Michael, because what you're doing is exactly that. The reward, the pain, the trauma, the mental health that you've experienced or know of people that has impacted your life, now you can actually see other people set free. So it's not hiding that shame, which I think a lot of veterans have a hard time with. I just want to forget. I just don't want to deal with the pain. I just don't want to. It's too much. Instead, when we can start sharing our story, we can start going, okay, this was painful. How do
Yeah.
I find God's glory in that? How do we find redemption in that? And how do we help other people walk through that same kind of trauma?
Yeah, I think it goes to, I go, you go, right? And I think we've all heard that saying, when your mess can become part of your message,
Mhm.
when you can embrace your story, we oftentimes share that it's your life, your story, right? Understand that you are the author of your story. You might lay a great plan, but understands that, plans change, right? There's two types of plans that might work and plans that don't work. And you just got to be willing to adapt with the plan. But you can decide how you execute regardless of the circumstances and where you put your faith and belief. And I think that's the power of your story. Um, Many on the show have heard me suggest that, people need to leave behind, some of their culturally prevalent ideas, their ideals, their opinions, their beliefs, things that they've embraced to be their truth. But their truths are creating a negative mindset. And what I think is interesting about your story is you identified your environment. You understood that you didn't want to be in it anymore, right? It didn't matter what the catalyst was. The fact that you were desperate and wanted out, that's fine. That can be a great reason to get out. And then you have to let it go. And I hear the trauma of what you experienced, which I don't even know that somebody could write that in a script because it doesn't even sound believable. You know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like, oh my gosh, like one of those events is very traumatic. And then you compound that. How did you let it go? I mean, it's one thing to say, I just surrendered and I gave my life to Jesus. And then, the butterflies showed up and the rainbow showed up and right, the angels sang from heaven and my life was renewed and everything was good. How did you, because that's hard, Christine. I mean, right? So did you, is it a continual process? How did you let it go?
That's such a great question. I think understanding, like, for instance, the person who trafficked me had such extreme trauma himself that, I find that my heart aches for him because he hasn't found the freedom that I've found.
Mm.
So I think the way to really let it go is, I believe the word of God is truth. And it says, that we can cast our cares on the Lord because he cares for us. And when I feel things coming on me, I just remind myself, I don't have to carry this. It's like if we can picture every pain, every unforgiveness, every burden, like bricks that we're just strapping onto our back, and that we don't have to carry it. We can actually unload that because he's saying, I'll carry that burden for you. And so why would we throw it back onto ourselves? And I see that people do it. We do it all the time. We'll cast it off, and then all of a sudden things happen, or we're reminded of something, and then we start throwing it back on us. And it's really that awareness of, we're not going to all of a sudden become perfect, but we are going to learn. And if we can make our goal, this is the way I choose to live, and it takes this much time to blow it again, to heap it back on us, then it takes that much time. And maybe it's not as many bricks. And then that next time, maybe we can get this far, and maybe it's even less bricks. And so that we can have that objective of, I'm okay where I'm at. Can I do a little more? And, I do share my book. I feel like it's really relevant is, my mother-in-law was sharing a story about going to Montana on a ski trip, and they get there and it's crazy cloudy. You can't see a thing. And the kids just desperately want to go skiing. So the mom and dad are like, yes, let's do it. So they get to the top of the slopes. They ski all day long. They have a blast. Well, the next day they go skiing again and it's crystal clear. Mom looks down the mountain and she goes, oh my gosh, I'm not going down that. And she literally sat on her butt and she slid down the entire mountain. And I'm laughing at this, all the kids are like, you just skied the thing all day the day before. And she was like, I know, but I didn't know what it looked like. When in reality, when it was cloudy, it was more dangerous. But you know what? While she was saying that, I really felt like God was just impressing on my heart. That's what I do with you, baby girl. Sometimes we can't handle that whole picture. Sometimes it's great. We get a glimpse of it, but then we can get paralyzed on how do I get from this point to this point? It's too far. And then we can't make any progress whatsoever. And so what I really feel like God is saying, baby girl, can you go this far?
Yeah.
Well done. All right, how about this far? Excellent. Can you make it this next step? You've
Yeah.
got it. And before you know it, you're down the mountain. And so I think in life and in these steps and in trauma, unforgiveness, pain, what is the next logical step to your future, to the trajectory of your life, to what you're setting out to do? If you can find that target and go, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to make that next critical step. And
Yeah,
that
you're talking micro wins. You're talking about, in the military, we oftentimes talk about micro wins. Like we know what the mission is. It can be pretty big. And again, plans will change. So you just got to take those little micro wins. And I think that's what I hear you saying is, cast the vision. The vision can be big. The
yeah.
vision should be big for your life. But understand that you're not going to get there in one step. And so you got to take those micro wins. I love that. You've got a saying, Christine, it's okay to be imperfect. Is it though? I mean, society really pushes this whole perfection piece, right? We see it on TV, we hear it in the media. Um, People are just slayed, for making mistakes, past mistakes 10 years ago, 20 years, 30 years ago, right? I mean, we see it happen today that, and, obviously if you make a mistake, you got to own it and, you got to be accountable. We know that, but is it really okay to be imperfect? I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, please tell
I,
me.
I think you always want to set the bar high. And I just had the conversation with one of our arrows. We call our ladies at Providence arrows. And, we're going to blow it. It's not a matter of if, but when. And where I think people get tripped up is when they blow it, they just feel like a failure. And
Mm,
really, messing up is opportunity for growth. That could be the catalyst to get you to that next great step. And so rather than looking at it as failure, look at it as opportunity. I had another gal come in because she was in a bit of trouble. She made some bad choices. I said, go ahead and shut the door. And she goes, am I in trouble? And I said, you're not in trouble, but you do have an opportunity to learn. And
yeah.
afterwards, she goes, I love it when I get in trouble with you, because it's how we see that mistake,
Yeah.
how we see that imperfection. It's part of the beauty. When you look at the artwork in back of me, that's imperfection. That's what creates the creativity, the uniqueness, the beauty of it. And so when we are imperfect, we can help others. When we're perfect, we don't need anyone. We don't need to grow. We've got it all together. And honestly, what a sad world that is. I mean, take me now, God, if I'm perfect, because I have nothing else to achieve.
Yeah, it's so, so true. Talk to us a little bit about Broken to Beautiful. This is your latest book, your newest book, or maybe your first book. I don't know. But talk to us. What do you hope your readers gain from reading Broken to Beautiful?
Yeah. My book is very raw. It's real. It's my life story, but I don't like stories of like, this is my life and then I found Jesus, and your gut kind of hurts from one chapter to the next.
Yeah.
Every chapter, if it's fear, um, if it's unforgiveness, if it's suicide, in every chapter we have the trauma, and then we have the victory, the redemption, and then a real challenge to the viewer of how can you reflect on your life. And the comments that I've received have been so overwhelming in just coming to the Lord, in choices that they've made, in seeking forgiveness. Oh my goodness, so many comments and feedback on people that have restored family relationships because of that. And so I want the reader to walk away with redemption for themselves. In fact, I have a workbook coming up that goes with Broken and Beautiful. And the subtitle to that is What's Your Story?
Mm,
And I don't want the workbook to be about what you learned in my book. I want the workbook to be just such a discovery of yourself, and really that getting everything out and finding the beauty and the freedom and the uniqueness in their story.
that's so good. It's so powerful too when we start to go deep and realize who we are, right? there's healing in that message, there's power in that message, and there's growth in that message. I love that. Broken to Beautiful. I want to be sure that people pick up your book for sure. You mentioned you've got a nonprofit, I believe. Is it Providence? Tell us about Providence.
Yeah, Providence Heights is a residential entrepreneurial training program. So, we offer housing, but that's not the big deal. Where I really struggle with the way people handle those that are in need is I describe it like, all of us have been at the edge of the cliff at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
And the next critical steps that we take can determine whether we start to fall off the cliff. And people are throwing ropes. They're throwing ropes, they're throwing ropes, and they're amazing. And we work with them. But depending on how far they've fallen off the cliff will really determine whether they have strength to hold on or whether we can even pull them up. So Providence Heights is really preventative. We focus on people who are just trying to keep their head above water. On the outside, they look great. On the inside, they're like, I am shriveling up. I'm dying inside.
Mm.
And those are the ones that we really want to get a hold of. And so we are an entrepreneurial program where we're actually starting businesses. We are teaching skill sets where, in fact, in 6 weeks, we just started March 1st, we started housing women. And in 6 weeks, they actually launched their first business. It's a coffee company called Providence Collective, is our nonprofit that funds the vision of Providence Heights. So it's sustainability for us as an organization, but it's teaching women. They built the website, they did the marketing, they're doing package fulfillment, they are doing everything. And
Mm.
it is spectacular to see all that they've overcome. And now they are finding that they have value and purpose. It's beautiful. And so it's for women and children. And for anyone that you guys know, any of your viewers, we would love to have female veterans be part of our organization because we have such an honor and respect for veterans. And we know that sometimes they just need an opportunity to
Yeah.
really regroup, work on the mental health, work on financial issues, and really just take a breather, discover their identity, what is their calling and purpose in life, and then teach them the skills to do so that they can launch into their destiny.
And see, I love that. I love that you are teaching them how to really reposition their skills, training, and ability and be productive members of society. I think that's so powerful. So, Christine, if there was one trait you think that men and women need to really embrace, okay, what is it?
Compassion.
Mm, interesting.
There's empathy is to understand
Yeah.
someone's position. Compassion is to walk with them. And that's where, if you've had pain and trauma, instead of keeping it quiet or hiding it or really not healing from it, instead, if you could find someone experiencing what you've experienced and maybe you're just 1 or 2 steps ahead, go walk with them. And you will find the greatest reward in life is just loving other people and walking with them through that trauma.
That's so good. So good. Such a great word, especially in today's society too. I think we do need to practice more empathy for sure, and certainly more compassion. In the military, we call those battle buddies that walk with us during difficult times, and that we will walk with others during difficult times. But having that compassion, I think, is so important, especially now. Christine, how do people find you? How do they follow you? How do they get in touch with you, support you, buy your book?
Yeah. So you can go to providenceheights.org, and that is where you can learn about our nonprofit organization. Providence Collective is where you can buy our fabulous coffee. And we're also on social media as Providence Heights. You can go to christinesoule.com as well.
That's great. Well, Christine, thank you for being on the show. To our listeners, I hope you gained value from this. I know I did. There's notes that I took from this. And for those of you who are getting ready to transition, if you're looking to discover and deploy your greatest gifts in family, work, and life, let us know. We'll help you do that. We'll go deep. And for our female veterans out there, if you can take advantage of what they're doing at Providence Heights, be sure you check them out. Christine, again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. Take care.